like to start off the interview just to ask you a little bit about how you became a Sister of St. Louis.
Okay, I am one of 9, a big family, 9. My mum was a teacher and my dad a farmer. My eldest sister got a scholarship to Monaghan as a boarder, so all of us girls followed. And I just was very happy at school in Monaghan. I loved the sisters, absolutely. But I didn't actually decide to enter until after I had done my Leaving Cert. And then I just felt this, I suppose, a call, we say, but I just wanted to give my whole life to God. I just had this idea that I wanted to live my life for God, and I would do it through the sisters, through joining St. Louis.
Okay, and so did you do your formation in Monaghan, or where did you do it?
Yes, in Monaghan. I did my novitiate, postulancy, novitiate and all. I was very lonely when I went there because it was completely different from being in the boarding school. Okay. You know, it was a different way, and I really missed home. I missed the farm, I suppose, country life. Yeah, I missed all of that. But gradually I settled. My 2 brothers one was ordained before I entered, but he went to the Philippines, Vinny, the following summer. So that was a big upheaval for me. And then 2 years later, I actually got home for my other brother, Pat, for his ordination, which was very unusual in those days. Mm-hmm. But I mean, it was just wonderful. And then he also went to the Philippines the following summer. So there was a lot of, I suppose, upheaval really. But I did settle, and basically I was always happy there. You know, mm-hmm. I felt at home, or that seems like a contradiction, but I just felt that I was in the right place.
Yes. Yeah. What kind of drew you to social work? Was there something there at that time?
I think it was all the changes from Vatican Council. Okay. I think there was a lot about going out to the people. You know, we weren't here for ourselves. Mm-hmm. We weren't here for our own sanctification. We really were here to work with people and to do what we could for people. I suppose that was it. And in the society as a whole, I think around that time also, creation-centered spirituality became quite, what would I say, in vogue. Mm-hmm. Matthew Fox, he had written some books. Eternal Blessings, I think, was the first one I read, and I was really impressed by that, in the sense that it was like the church wasn't really what it was about. It was more to do with our relationship with God through the environment, through the people we worked with, and that was great. And then also in those years, my 2 brothers were in the Philippines, and they were coming home for holidays, and they were introducing me to Latin American, the basic Christian communities, the idea of liberation theology. Vinny used to give me books on that, which I read, and so everything was new. It was interesting, and it was exciting. And it was great. Yes. And I loved it. And I was really happy. You know?
Great. So you spent 2 years in Stella Maris?
2 years in Stella Maris. Then an opening came up for me to go to Shropshire to work with the Shrewsbury Diocesan Rescue Society. And Helena Moss was working already within that organisation. And Biga Ryan was there as well. And she left that summer, and Mother Colin Kill asked me to go to replace her. And that she also saw that as a sort of a practical experience before making a final decision about further training. Okay. So I went to there. Telford New Town was being built. There were no shops, no schools, no public transport system. A lot of young people, families transferring from Northern Ireland, out of the troubles in Northern Ireland at the time. Also the overspill from Birmingham and London. So it was a multicultural, really, what will I say, disenfranchised people. You know, they were transferred into this place,
this new suburb with nothing.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. So a lot
suburb
of problems.
Was it Birmingham, or where would you be in the nearest kind of
Birmingham
large
would
town?
be in the nearest big city.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So I worked there for 3 years. Was good, made many relationships. I just felt that it was valuable work.
And what were you doing while you were there?
Visiting the families, usually the organisation, CanMQ, would get a phone call that people were in difficulties, having difficulties. So visiting them, connecting them with social services, trying to find out what the problems were. Some, it was they just had no idea of how to manage their money, how to manage their, the buying fish and chips, food all the time, not cooking, stuff like that. So I would help them I would encourage them really to sort of look at their expenses, their outgoings, what they were getting, and how they were spending their money, and encouraging them to cook. Also with the children, it was difficult for mothers, maybe the husband was out all day, the mother was at home, with the children, nowhere to go, no public transport system, it was difficult.
Right. So it's kind of around this time that you got involved in working with domestic migrant workers? Around
that time, yes, was during my training. My brother Benny came back from the Philippines along with other Colombians. A lot of them were leaving the society at the time, and they were all getting involved in social justice where they were. They were already doing that in the Philippines, so they brought what they had learned in the Philippines, I suppose, to the UK. And I got involved helping a Colombian who is still a Colombian. He was very involved also, or instrumental in my getting involved with the migrants. And I suppose my biggest learning in those years, I think about 78, 79, I did a weekend. He came with me, we did a weekend. It was called an INODEP course, where you saw how the society is made up. So you have the pyramid, most people know that now, but the pyramid where the owners and controllers, the wealth, the next very wealthy people who are that way because they've inherited it. Then the auxiliary class, which is us, professional people, and then the working class, and then the disenfranchised. And I remember being really confused during the workshop, and then on the Sunday afternoon, just before we finished, in the final sort of session, the guy who was leading it said, now we know where we are. Our choice is, do we align ourselves with those who are above us, or do we align ourselves with those who are marginalised or disenfranchised? And straight away I thought, that's me happy, because I now know exactly where I'm going to commit myself, or my life is going to go down this route. And I've never looked back.
So can you tell me just a bit more about your work with domestic migrants?
Well, we started off with establishing the Commission for Filipino Migrant Workers. That was already established in Rome, in Italy, by returned missionaries. So missionaries who were from different congregations coming back from the Philippines. And during those years, during the 70s, thousands and thousands of Filipinos were migrating to Europe mainly, UK, Italy, all the countries in Europe. In actual fact, it was the income from the migrants abroad was the biggest dollar earner for the Philippines in those years. And the Marcos government had a program of exporting their workers. And they were being very badly treated in the countries they were going into, lacking rights, but doing all the work that a lot of them were professionals. They were nurses, social workers, teachers, and were coming to Europe doing, say, auxiliary nursing, domestic work, waiters and waitresses, room attendants in the hotels and that. So they were working way below. They were being de-skilled, really. They had to stay in that work for 4 years, and then at the end of the 4 years, if they had kept the conditions of the work permit, which meant that one of the conditions was that you remained in that work for the 4 years, then they could get indefinite leave to remain, and they would be the same as anybody else. Anyway, so we established the office in Rome, asked A and myself if we would set up a centre in London, which we did. Meant to be to help the migrants, Filipino migrants, to organise themselves. So within the hospitals, within the hotels, we did that. We went around and we worked with other communities as well at that time. The Colombian community, I remember the Latin American communities, the African Refugee Housing Action Group. We were all working towards, in some way, helping people to demand their rights, or to get the rights that they were entitled to as workers in the UK. it became the really, I suppose, socially in those years as well. The Conservatives, Maggie Thatcher was elected in 1979. And one of the first things she did was to abolish the work permit system. And so she abolished the work permit system for all those workers, but they introduced what they call a concession in the immigration rules, which allowed wealthy employers to bring their domestic workers to the UK, but without recognising them as workers. So you had, for example, on a domestic worker's passport, on one page it said, leave to enter the United Kingdom, employment paid or unpaid, strictly prohibited. And on the opposite page it said, leave to enter the United Kingdom, accompanying Sheikh Abdul Al-Hassa or some sheikh, his name in the passport, and outside of the household of that family, that worker had no rights whatsoever. They just could be picked up and deported. It came to a head with us when individuals began coming to the centre with nothing, just wearing schneelas, the clothes they were wearing, no passport, no money, hadn't been paid any money, and very often having injuries, you know, like burns on their arms from an iron where the employer would have put the iron on their hand, bruises on their back. I mean, really horrendous. And we realised, when we looked at it, we realised that we couldn't actually solve each one's problems because they still needed to work, they still needed to send money home. So we studied the legislation and discovered it was the legislation that was wrong. So we made a decision then that we were going to fight to change the legislation, to change the law. And actually some people at the time, very good people who were working with us, said to us, you'll never change the law. And I said, we have to because it's wrong. And they said, you can't because the law is the law here in this country, you know. I said, yeah, but it was wrong. Anyway, from there we organised the domestic workers themselves, helped them to appreciate or to understand that it wasn't their fault that they were undocumented, that they had escaped from their employer was not a criminal offence, even though in the society as a whole it was looked on as a criminal offence. You were living and working clandestinely. And we would explain to them that legally they didn't have rights, but morally they had as human beings and as workers. Yeah. We brought a group together and very briefly they organised, we helped them to organise themselves as an organisation of undocumented migrant workers. And they call themselves Waling Waling, which means it's a beautiful orchid in the Philippines. It comes out, it blossoms at night. It's closed in during the day and then it blossoms at night. So they said they were beautiful flowers living and working clandestinely in the UK. So they were established, and then we also, after 2 years negotiating with various people in the Home Office and various members of Parliament, MPs, members of the House of Lords, Cardinal Hume at the time, we brought the domestic workers to meet with them, told them their story. They were all very sympathetic, very supportive, but nothing was happening in terms of change. So we decided to establish an organisation. We decided that we would have to go public. We would have to campaign publicly, because prior to this we were worried that if the Home Office or the police knew that we had all these domestic workers in our centre, that they could raid the place, deport them, and that would be terrible, not only for the workers but for us as well. So we established Calayan, which is a campaign, was established specifically to campaign to change the legislation. And that arose because a radio programme, Radio 4, Face the Facts programme, they did an interview in June of 1987 where 6 domestic workers told what their situation was. The narrator was able to put it in context, and we got massive support from the British public. So we said this is the time to go public because now it's out and we know that there's public support for it. It was a 10-year-long campaign. We worked with the union. We got a lot of support from the Transport and General Workers Union at the time. We worked with the church sector, justice and peace groups. We did parliamentary campaigning in the UK. We did lobbying and campaigning. We did campaigning in Europe, in the European Parliament. with the Trade Union Congress in the UK, with the International Labour Organisation, and with many organisations of domestic workers worldwide. So it was, the publicity was very, very broad. I mean, all around the world, Britain was being shown to be having a system of slavery in those years. 91 was our worst year in 1991 because the Conservative Party were re-elected. We were on the verge of winning the campaign at that stage. They were re-elected, back to square one. So we concentrated for those years then. We said definitely by 97 Labour are going to get in. So we concentrated our efforts, still very broad, very public, but we really got shadow Labour people to make commitments during their conferences that they would give us 4 demands, very simple, that domestic workers would be admitted into the country as workers with the right to change employer, and that those who are already living and working clandestinely since 1980, 81, 82, that they would be legalised or regularised, as we said. And Labour did win in 97, and it was we had another year of negotiating now with the new Labour government. They also didn't want to give, but we had them on voice tape, we had them videoed, we had letters from them, the Minister himself, Mike O'Brien. We had a letter from him saying that it was a shocking situation and under a Labour government this wouldn't happen. Okay. Anyway, they did give us all our demands. So from 1998 until 2012, all domestic workers entering the UK came in as workers with a worker's visa and with the right to change employer and with the same rights as any other worker in the UK, and that was major. It was a major achievement. Unfortunately, 2012, all of those rights have been withdrawn, and they're in a much worse situation now than they were even in the early 80s.
So there's lots of working and campaigning still to be done.
Still to be done and still going on, and we'll continue.
Brexit has had a major negative impact on these people.
Desperate. I mean, we don't really know the full impact of Brexit, but it's going to be terrible because a lot of the legislation in the UK has actually come from Europe, certainly in relation to workers' rights. A lot of it is, and human rights. A lot of it's coming from Europe. Okay.
Do you feel that your work with the domestic workers has empowered them over the years? Do you feel they're probably still in a better position than they were back in the late 70s?
Absolutely. Even the new ones coming. I was at the Justice for Domestic Workers, which is another organisation we established in 2008, 2009. I was there on Sunday before I came here last Sunday, and one of the newly escaped domestic workers, she told her story publicly in front of everybody and said that she now has, even though she knows she has no rights, she said, I have a new life. She said, I have friends, I know it's difficult, it'll be difficult to find work, but at least I have a new life being out of this employer. She was with a terrible employer.
And I presume there's still a lot of abuse going on, and is it as bad as it was in the past?
I can tell you that Calayan, in their recent documentation, they have kept statistics of those who came in under the old system, so the ones who had rights, and since the legislation changed, and there's a dramatic increase in brutalities, in bad treatment of employers when they realise that the workers don't have any rights. And you see, that's for me the most important thing is to invest rights in the workers. I would always say, you're the one, even we wouldn't, when a worker would say to me, my employer said she'd give me so much and now she's not giving me, can you ring her? I'd always say, no, you're the one who's doing the work. She needs you, you will ring her and you tell her. And they do. And they find that the employer actually does give them. If they say, I'm going to leave, if you
so you help them empower themselves.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. Lots done and lots more to do by the sounds of things.
Exactly. Yeah.
So I suppose in your work you have come across many people from different faiths and cultures, and I guess how has this influenced your understanding of diversity and interfaith dialogue?
Yes. I think in England it's always been that we have mixed with people of different faiths, different cultures, and that it's almost, it happens without you even thinking about it. For example, my co-worker at the moment, my very good friend and co-worker, is a Muslim woman, and she comes on pickets and demonstrations, and she gives advice, and she works alongside me. But I never think of it as, I mean, I know she's a Muslim, she wears the hijab, and we would talk about like the different things she does and what we do, the differences in our religions, the differences in our cultures. But it's just, we take it for granted, and
it's just normal.
It's part of, I remember in 97 when I came back to Ireland, first I was really shocked at how white Dublin was, you know, all white. Coming out of UK, you just take so much for granted in terms of mixing with different cultures, different nationalities and that. Now, of course, it's much better here as well. But I don't know, the diversity workshop that we had, I think 2009, January 2009, which was organised by the previous CLT, that was a wonderful experience for me, in the sense that, I don't know, there was just a recognition or an acknowledgement of our diversity in St. Louis, which I just thought was wonderful. You know, it for me it connected our, like Sint Unum, the whole interconnectedness of everything and of every person and of every, like in the universe, we're so interconnected that I just think it's wonderful. And that's why I think it's horrendous, the wars, what's happening at the moment, you know, with since Iran, Iraq, Syria, all of those countries, and Nigeria as well. Every country where there's war, I can't comprehend why people do that to each other. You know, when you think of the beautiful life we could have, beautiful universe. I don't know. It's just
it seems so senseless, doesn't it?
It does.
Yeah,
it does.
And you mentioned Sint Unum there, our motto.
Yes.
Can you share with us what Sint Unum means to you? I mean, you touched upon the interconnectedness there. Is there anything else you'd like to share?
Sint Unum, it's just such a beautiful, I just think it's a beautiful aspiration, and it's something that I just feel to live it, you know, if you could live that ideal, what a wonderful world we'd have, you know.
It would be an ideal world.
There's nothing more what do I say, inspirational, and more worth living for, than this, what you call it, ideal, I suppose. I don't know, really. It's what life is about, really.
I suppose we were chatting earlier, you were talking about from the smallest little organism to the largest beast on the planet, and
that's right.
That we're all interconnected and dependent on each other.
Absolutely. And the story of the bees is a very good example.
I know, that's a worrying one, isn't it?
It is. It just, and we've been so unaware, but I think in ancient traditions and cultures, they were very aware. We have lost it, somewhere along the line. But now I think there's a recognition from, you know, the Planet Earth programs, David Attenborough's programs, and now there are different people. I don't know if you've noticed, but different people doing these programs. Not only David Attenborough, others, which just shows that that we're all becoming more aware of this interdependence and our need for each other, really. Just straightforward, our need for each other.
So I suppose this brings me on to the next question. How has it been living and working in England, and I suppose being on the leadership in different ways over the past years?
It's been absolutely wonderful, Máirín, honestly. What will I say? I just have had a wonderful life, and I think that I've got that for me personally now, and it might be to do with say entering after Vatican Council. You know, there were a lot of changes, and that also liberation theology coming into vogue, basic Christian communities, creation-centered spirituality, all of that, and then living in England, being able to do it, you know, to live that way. And I think that in the Louis we got a great freedom. You know, I just feel I was out on a limb in the early years, you know.
There weren't many sisters involved really in sort of social work or community campaigning or anything like that.
That's right. It was mostly, yeah, that's right. There weren't many. But I think the 1985 chapter for me was really significant because, and I remember clearly when Dorothy McCluskey and Breed Carr came to, I was living in Fulham Palace Road at the time in a community there, and Dorothy, and she was reading out the mission statement, and I remember I actually said straight out, "Oh, Dorothy, if that's what's coming out, I'm all in, 100%. You know, I suppose my first time after entering to make a further commitment, I suppose, or to renew my commitment to being part of the St. Louis family. Yeah, because I felt now we really are, we're really going to effect change. You know, because of in all our ministries to change unjust structures. That was really the line, because I think that the patching up bad systems is not good. You know, if you see if something is wrong and you're just sorting it out for one individual, it's not going to help the whole. You know, and I think that if we can always try to get to the root cause of the problem, and then to look at it and to analyse. You see, we're educated people, and I think that we have a bad history in general. Religious and church have a bad. We're expected to be doing good works, and good works often can actually contribute to the bad situation. And I'm not decrying good works. I think it's good to do good works, but I think alongside the helping, which we have to do, I mean, you have to take the person where they're at, you have to help them out of that situation. But if we're not at the same time trying to change the root cause of the problem, we can become part of the problem. And we have a saying, actually, was one of the Africans, Ronnie Moodley from an Indian South African, very active guy in our day, you know, in the 80s and 90s, and he used to always say, if we're not part of the solution, we are part of the problem. And I really believe that, you know, because I can see now, even now myself back in England, I can see where a lot of the voluntary organisations still doing good work, but not effecting change. It's like they're caught into the system.
They're plastering the wounds, but not preventing them.
Exactly, and it's not good.
Just to go back onto legacy, what legacy do you feel the Sisters of St. Louis in the English mission are leaving for the future?
Oh, I think they're leaving a huge legacy in the schools, of course, number one, because where we were based in England, in East Anglia, very low proportion of Catholics, high proportion of Anglicans and other religions, and in our schools we've always had a lot of children from all different backgrounds and faiths and no faiths. So that's one area. Then there's the whole adult education that has taken place, like Kathleen O'Sullivan, her prayer groups, and you know, she's written books and all of that. That's there. Paul Mary did a lot for families, broken families, and that. She did a lot of guidance, family guidance. Then the whole promotion of justice has been very strong in England, in all over the country. We've branched out, like we've gone up to the north, like Duckenfield, Liverpool, Oldham, Bolton, places like that. Small numbers, but all engaged in ministries, like not institutional, if you know what I mean, out working with the people and promoting justice and that. University chaplaincies, we have sisters in the university, and that, like, for young people is fantastic, you know, the youth that they would get. So I think that there is a big legacy, even yet, like we are small. There's only about, I think, 15 maybe or 16 of us, aside from two, one who's in a nursing home and one who's in sheltered accommodation. Everybody else even in
very
their
active still.
80s, really active,
Yeah.
like visiting hospitals, promoting justice, being members of justice and peace groups, things like that. Yeah, I think that we have, because we've had the freedom to do it.
Yes.
I think we haven't been institutionalized.
Right.
That's what I feel
Okay.
about us, and I think it's absolutely fantastic, because if you're institutionalized, I mean, for me the worst thing is, well, I read a book. I mean, it just is amazing what affects you or what influences you.
Mm-hmm.
While I was studying, I read a book called Asylum, and I can't even remember who wrote it. But that talked about institutions. Institutions are there for a purpose,
Mm-hmm.
and we need them.
Yeah.
But if they become what's important, then it's counterproductive. So I'm very conscious of that myself, and I think that and I'm deeply appreciative of our institution, like the Sisters of St. Louis, because I couldn't have done the work I've done if not for the support that the congregation has given me. I've been to nearly every country. I've been to travel so much in relation to my work, mostly, both in the congregation. You were talking about leadership, being in the leadership. I mean, I would really encourage people to go on leadership teams. It's very difficult sometimes to get people to take up leadership.
Right, okay.
But actually, it's such a wonderful experience to be able to travel.
It's hard, but it's very rewarding.
You're nobody in the sense that you don't belong anywhere. But then you have this opportunity to get to know the congregation, to get to know the reality of other countries and other peoples, where everywhere the sisters are working, and they take you around to see their work, and you see the wonderful work. I mean, I always came back from visits that we went on while on CLT, always came back really feeling, my God, the work, it'll never be documented. I mean, all
That's
of it.
What we're trying to do now as part of this.
But it's so, Máirín, you won't get a fraction of what's being done.
Of course.
It's just,
well, you've told me your life in less than an hour, so we're only tipping the iceberg, I'm sure.
Yeah.
So I suppose on that note, would you have any words of wisdom that you'd like to leave us with regarding to, say, our vision and mission as an institute?
Oh God, wisdom. I mean,
the hardest question to ask.
I wouldn't. What I would really feel though is that I think that our chapters, the documents that have come out, certainly going back to the 85 chapter and on up until 2015, if we could live even a fraction of the aspirations of what came out of those chapters, we'd be doing all right. But the one thing I would say is the mission statement. I think that if we really lived the mission statement, we're in heaven already. Here on earth, we're in heaven already. Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's a lovely note to end on. And thank you very much, Margaret, for taking the time to come all the way from England to the north side of Dublin.
It fitted in with other work, as we say.
Lovely. Thanks very much, Margaret.
Yeah, thanks, Máirín.
Thank you.
Yeah, okay.